Hello dears, Natalie Locke here with episode 8 of Write the Story, where I give you a writing prompt out of this book, 10 words to include in that story, and about 300 words worth of space to write the story. The rules that I've applied to myself since the beginning and I've kind of stuck with is that I give myself 5 minutes to outline, throw those information down on an outline, and then I give myself 20 minutes to write the story. As you can see, I already have my outline done. So what I'll do is I'll let y'all know the prompt and the 10 words. I'm gonna write the story, and then I'll come back and let you know what the difference is between my outline and my story, if anything changed, as well as what I liked about the story, what I didn't like about the story, and the ever revealing what my favorite line was and my least favorite line was. So here is episode 8's story. The year is 2563. The 10 words you're to include are space station, knuckle, interview, horse, 27, lipstick, transformation, studio, distribution, and assert. So I have my outline done. I'm gonna go ahead and write the story for myself, and then I'll let you know what the difference is between the two. So I've written the story and I got my outline. Here are the differences between the two. First, let's go through the outline. In the outline, I have a gentleman named Max going for an interview at Studio 6. Then there's a thought that he has, and he's like, great, I'm 27 and I'm just now about to assert himself into the workforce, is what I have down here. And he's ready for the transformation from student to employee. And when he walks into the interview, the woman who's about to give him the interview is putting on lipstick. When she finally does speak up, she says, why do you want to be a part of Studio 6 and maintain the International Space Station? Then later, he is talking about how he wants to advance our civilization. It's been 600 years since we landed on the moon and we haven't done anything else. We haven't tried to better ourselves in any sort of way. And she says, hold your horses, don't knuckle and dime this program, pretty much telling him he's only going to be there to distribute data and he needs to kind of know his place. Of course, the phrase is not knuckle and dime, it's nickel and dime. I wanted to show how, I won't even explain it. I'll explain that part a little bit later, but here's what stayed the same from the outline, and here's what changed. Out of 10 words, the only one that did not stay the same was assert. Assert was originally Max's idea of he wanted to assert himself in the workforce, but ended up being the interviewer's word by the end of it, of kind of telling Max, hey, don't try to assert yourself. You're not going to have my job in 2 years, or I kind of put an edge to her. So that is the difference between the outline and the story. Here's the story. Max double checks his tie in the elevator doors. It took him 3 different ties to choose this one, yet he still is 15 minutes early. He steps out onto the 70th floor. The receptionist greets him with a smile. How can I help you? She asked. Interview with Miss Range? He coughed. I have a 0900 interview with Miss Range. The receptionist nodded with a smirk. Please take a seat. She'll be right with you. Max's hand dropped around the back of his neck as he slinked to a chair. He looked back at the receptionist. Hey, she spoke up. You'll be fine. You arrived early, so you're already off to a great start. Max returned her smile. Man, 27, done with school, and now just transforming from student to employee. It doesn't feel like a great start. A woman's heels clicked across the floor. Mr. Mullen? Max stood up with a nod. Follow me, she said as she turned on her heel. The woman led Max to a conference room where another woman was sitting on the other side, reapplying her lipstick as Max walked in. Max sat down across from her without invitation. She didn't acknowledge him until after she turned from putting away her lipstick and compact in her purse. Max spoke first. I brought copies of my resume. The woman's eyes slid over the paper Max laid in front of her. She looked back at him without touching it. Why do you want to work at Studio 6? Max opened, then closed his mouth. Get your thoughts in order. Well, I like being a part of something bigger than myself. And what could be bigger than the International Space Station? I think I could be a real asset to the team. We landed on the moon almost 600 years ago and haven't progressed further. I think I could help get us to our next discovery. Miss Range held up her hand. Hold your horses. Your job will be to distribute the data. You don't need to assert yourself just yet. We don't need to discover anything if what we have works just fine. Otherwise, we're just knuckle and diming ourselves. Nickel and dime, Max thought. So much for advancing civilization. This futuristic story is a little different from most futuristic stories. Usually with futuristic stories, we have post-apocalyptic story, or we have we're super awesome technology-wise and we're advancing and already live in space. I didn't want to go either of those routes with this story. With this story, I almost wanted it to be a cautionary tale where the year 2563 is about 594 years. Let me check that math. Yes. The year 2563 is 594 years after we landed on the moon. And having that knowledge just made me want to have this idea that we just became complacent. We didn't want to advance. It was as if the fear of the unknown stopped us. It halted us as a civilization, and we just plateaued as a civilization. We didn't want to learn more. And even though I did it just slightly by having the phrase knuckle and dime instead of nickel and dime, I wanted to show how if you aren't advancing, you run the risk of regression. And even though I did it through language and there was other ways to do it, but I mean, I feel like this story could be expanded more and I could show more things of how society is almost regressing. Now, not to the point of the movie Idiocracy. I didn't want that aspect, even though it's really funny. I didn't want that aspect of society, but I did want an aspect of what are we doing if we're not trying to better ourselves, not just as people, but as an entire human race? Why are we just allowing mediocrity? Why are we just allowing ourselves to not even to try to be better? I mean, it's one thing to try and fail. It's another thing to not even try. That's kind of the approach I was going with this story. And I feel I kind of did it. I also feel like overall, I feel like I could have done better, because even though I have all these ideas of the deeper meaning of how this society didn't progress, you don't really see it on the paper. To me, I feel like I didn't do a good job conveying this deeper thought, this deeper reflection on society. And I think it's just going to take time as a writer, and it's probably going to take more than 300 words to convey such a complex, thought-provoking idea for me to get that across the page. I like my idea. I like the inspiration for my story. But as the story stands, I feel like it could use a lot of work, a lot more work than compared to the other flash fictions that I've done on previous episodes. Now to my least favorite line and favorite line. Other parts in this story that I did like is that I felt I did really well showing versus telling on the personality types of Max, how he was nervous, but yet he arrived early. He tried on multiple ties. He was kind of assertive, but yet at the same time scared. And I really like that about Max. I made the receptionist really welcoming and friendly. I mean, the fact that she actually felt the need to go, hey, you're doing okay. I felt I gave her personality. I felt I gave Miss Range, the interviewer, personality. I will say that I kind of don't like, I never called her Miss Range Like I said, hey, he has an interview with Miss Range and he had to go to a conference room where a woman's putting on lipstick, but I should have had the woman who escorted Max to the conference room, I should have had her say, Miss Range, Mr. Mulland is here. And so that way there could have been a connect of like, oh, this is the lady. I felt that I kind of dropped the ball a little bit on that. But at the same time, is that being too detailed? I only got 300 words. I think I need to also give the reader some credit here too on they can figure out, hey, I have an interview with this person. Then he goes and sits in a room where there's only one other person and it kind of fits the description in the sense of Miss Range. A woman is sitting there. I still felt that I gave these characters personality. You kind of knew what to expect of them as characters. I was happy with that delivery when it came to the character development. I feel I've gotten better in that sense, especially in such a short story. Though I have been writing smaller, and here's another thing, besides my math up in the top corner, I filled the whole page down to the last line. So I'm not as wordy as I was on the previous 2 stories. So we're getting there. Something that I also think I could have worked better on is Max's internal thoughts, because this is like third person close where we can hear his thoughts, but I'm still referring to everything in third person. And I feel I could have done better. Like nickel and dime Max thought so much for advancing civilization. That was an internal thought. The other internal thought Max had was when the reception was trying to give him words of encouragement of, you're doing great, you arrived early. He said, man, 27, done with school and just now transforming from student to employee. Like he's kind of shooting himself down a little bit. But yet he also has great ideas on how to advance civilization. So it's this balance of nervousness, uncertainty, feeling like he's late to the game, but at the same time, like I got something to bring to the table. And I'm proud of my character development. I will say that, not to toot my own horn. I know there's always ways to make it better, but how far I've come, I'm happy with it. And I think as a writer, we always have to, it's another phrase that I say, and I usually refer it into my job that I do full time, but you always know more than you think you do, but less than you think you should. And I feel that phrase is really important because it's recognizing you could always learn more, but it's also keeping you humble and surprising yourself for how much you do know. The other internal thought that Max had was when he was about to respond to Mrs. Range's single interview question that we're exposed to, and he opens his mouth and then closes it, but then he says, get your thoughts in order. And as someone who kind of just says what's on her mind all the time, getting my thoughts in order is really key to make sure I don't say or any of those. Pretty much most of the things that I edit out of these videos. So far, I haven't had to edit out of this statement, but I'm sure I'm going to have to edit out in other parts of this video. That get your thoughts in order, I feel could have also been better conveyed as an internal thought. I tried to use it with my voice. Now, if you were reading this directly, there would be italics to let you know these are internal thoughts as well. So that's kind of the difference between an audiobook versus reading. It's okay. It's okay. My least favorite line is also not my least favorite line. It's I had to fight myself to use these lines because I didn't want to use them, but at the same time, I kind of felt it conveyed the character. And I'm sure you've heard this writing advice, but don't use cliches. Don't use idioms. Don't use them. It's lazy writing, I've heard. And I could see it if your entire book was written in it. But I wanted to convey how the interviewer, Miss Range, was misusing idioms. Now, she did say hold your horses correctly. I will say, to skirt around that suggested writing advice that I totally broke, is to use it in dialogue and not in the narrative. So that's one way you can work around that. Now, for my favorite line, it's another situation of where I was showing instead of telling, but where I said Max's hand draped around the back of his neck as he slinked to a chair. you kind of know he's beating himself up for flubbering how to talk just a few moments ago. And I felt that that was a really good line to convey that. So those are my favorite lines and my least favorite line, even though my least favorite wasn't exactly least favorite, but I did have to convince myself to actually want to use that line. Until next episode, have a good day, have a good week, have a good month, have a good year.